NERDSoul.
Please take 10 friends to see the movie. We've got to make this movie a success.
Hi everyone, I'm Tendo Nagenda. Pleasure to be here. Since we're kind of intimate here, I'm just going to ask a couple questions. We can have an interactive back and forth if you want. You guys are all students, or most of you are students, right? Yes. Some know that you're interested in film and the visual arts, perhaps cinematography. Some are still thinking about what you're interested in. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, cinematography students over here? Film students? Fantastic. Okay, how many people have heard of the movie Queen of Katwe? That's good. Did you hear about it from your professors or school, or did you hear about it in your social networks, media, or commercials otherwise?
Local theaters.
Online? Okay. All right, great. Well, it's a good start. I'm going to talk about that film a little bit, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of a broader narrative that's probably more relevant for you guys. Specifically, my path towards making the film and what I hope to achieve with the film, and hopefully, we can find some places where we intersect in terms of our experiences, things that we have in common, and ways that you can be making your own films or whatever other projects you're interested in making. Okay, so to start off, I have this banner up here which highlights group ticket sales, because I want people to go see the movie. If you like what you see, go see the movie. There'll be plenty for you to make that decision by the end of the time we're done talking. But this is a quick reminder. You can also socially post about it and tell friends. It's kind of a movie, although made by Disney, that really needs the grassroots support for it to be successful, frankly. So, starting off, I'm Tendo Nagenda. Thank you for the introduction. I work at Disney. I'm an executive vice president of production, and what that means is that I work in live action, not the animated films, although those are amazing and miraculous, but I work on finding movies to tell in live action, and then I supervise the development of those movies, meaning hiring the screenwriter, hiring the producer, hiring the director, all the way until we agree that it's good enough to make as a movie, and then I supervise the movie through production, post-production, and all the way until its release. So I'm creatively in charge of finding, developing, and then producing projects in live action that get out there into the world. Not all of them. I have other colleagues that do similar jobs, but out of my group comes movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, Jungle Book, live action Cinderella, Saving Mr. Banks is another film I worked on, and I'll tell you about a couple of others as well. So, how did I... Oops, here we go. No. Okay, don't look. It's all good. No. Okay. No.
You're on the last slide.
I'm on the last slide. You are correct. See? You guys are ahead of the game already. I love it. Ah, okay. So, my mom, who's in the audience today, this is a picture of her, my two sisters, and myself. I have this picture up here because it's sort of the beginning of what probably led to the film being in front of you all here today, which is that when I was born in Los Angeles, grew up kind of, I'd say, La Brea and Washington area for the most part, some Santa Monica experience, but when I was 12 years old, my father's also here, we moved back to Uganda, East Africa, where my father's from, for what we thought was going to be permanent, a permanent move, but ended up being a year and a half. And I went through all kinds of emotions. It was pretty dramatic, I would say, traumatic in certain ways, just because I grew up in LA. I was in my opinion, an American, but I didn't really have a broader consciousness of the world. So moving to Uganda actually gave that to me, even if begrudgingly. And one of the things that I think is great about it is it expands your worldview, right? So if you guys have the opportunity to travel, I highly recommend it. If you have parents and or relatives or lineage that goes to other places, I suggest you embrace it as much as you can, and then make it a part of your ethos overall. What this did for me is make me realize, you know, I was a 12-year-old here, I was a 12-year-old there. There's a lot in common that 12-year-olds here and there have. I'd say a lot more that connects us than divides us, and it gave me that kind of perspective, which is really important, and it also kind of made me focus on reading, frankly, which is the key to making films and television if you're really interested in it. It's always about finding stories. You're constantly reading books, articles, scripts, screenplays, just ideas in general, and it gave me a lot of time to read books and other things because there were no movie theaters and no television. So it's a little picture to start it off. So my career path, which I've been asked to talk a little bit about, is kind of unwieldy. I put it into a visual form just so you guys can get an idea of how all over the place it might be. Doesn't have to be that way for everyone, but it was that way for me. I went to Claremont McKenna College out in Claremont, California, liberal arts school, and I majored in government and finance. Not knowing what I wanted to do, I think I'm probably typical of a first-born, first-generation American where in my mind, I now can articulate it, I thought my job was to major and get a job. And so, you know, they had a 99% job placement at Claremont McKenna, so that's what I majored in. I didn't really realize until later going to school, and then even after I started working, that you could do something that you were truly passionate about and you could make a living, and that was as legitimate a class as some of the stuff that's required. It seems like you guys are probably ahead of me in that respect, doing things that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be film, obviously, but I didn't even realize that was a potential career path for me. So, graduating, I got a job at a place called Deloitte & Touche, which is a financial accounting and consulting firm that operates all over the world. I got the job 6 months before I graduated. I thought it was great, never expected to get it. I had an expense account. It was, you know, I had no idea what I was getting into. And then I started the job, and kind of after one or 2 months realized I just wasn't passionate about what I was doing. It was hard to get up in the morning and go to work, and I was working a lot, 15, 17 hours a day. So I started to think about what I was really passionate about, meaning what I wanted to do when I wasn't paid to do anything. And I would watch movies like most of us do, watch television, but I'd do more than that. I'd read about it. I was interested in the process. I was interested in about the business of it, how it kind of came to be, who the people were behind the scenes. And so I did as much research as I could into that just to see, like, is there a job I could potentially do within that? That led me to taking a leave of absence from Deloitte & Touche and going to a place that was pretty rudimentary. I think the education you guys are getting here is probably way, way better. This was a 12-week program, actually, at a place called the New York Film Academy. And depending on how you use it, it can be a ripoff, but for me it was great because it put me, I left, I went to New York City for about 12 weeks. I got on a camera, I was able to like write scripts, go out and make films, short films with other students, and then get in the edit room and edit, and I loved the entire process, and that was why I wanted to go there, to make sure I loved the actual process at the beginning of it, not just the business, not just the, hey, get there and have a movie and get celebrated, but the entire process, which I found I did. So I came back to LA, and I got a job in finance at HBO. Pretty good company. My opinion was, or my strategy was, to use what I had to get where I wanted to go. So I had finance. I wanted to learn more about production. Production finance was the job I got. Seemed pretty perfect. When I was there, I took a bunch of classes at UCLA Extension, just in creative storytelling and reading scripts, and then basically reporting on them, doing coverage. Also, physical production and how you actually make a movie. While I was there, I also, after I took a number of classes, I realized I definitively want to produce film and television. And how do you do that? I thought that there were 3 roads, really. I could go find Harry Potter on my own with no connections, no money, no real experience. I could work my way through HBO, which kind of take a long time, or I could essentially start over. And I found an internship for a producer named Mark Johnson 1 day a week, and I'd take vacation days from HBO. I'd go in there, I'd intern. Interning, by the way, is a phenomenal way to get experience and a big part of the film and television business, so you should definitely be thinking about that. It A, taught me I really liked what I was doing when I was there interning, and then B, also gave me experience doing it and then starting to build relationships. After about 8 weeks, 10 weeks, which is really only 8 or 10 days, their job opened up, and they offered me a job as an assistant. And my business is very apprentice-oriented. You do something, and therefore you're credited with the ability to do it. You gain experience, and then people trust you with more, and you go on. Mark Johnson, by the way, is an Academy Award-winning producer for movies like Rain Man. He also produced the television show Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and a number of others. So I was assistant for him. I liked it, but I was still putting myself through film school, and that's another theme that you'll hit on. It's a continuing education. You're never done learning, which is something that motivates me and excites me. You got to figure out if that excites you as well, because there's at no point in time where you're going to have it figured out. Trust me. And in fact, part of the process is, as I call it, being comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I met a friend who I think is really talented. She's a writer, director, and performer. And she had written a short that she wanted to do as a play. We decided to do it as a short film, but for both of us to gain experience, but like shoot it like a real film, on film, real locations, real actors, the whole thing. Took some time to put that together, and it was called The Memo. And I did that while I was an assistant, and I needed more time to focus on it because the job was really hard at Mark's company. So I got not an easier job, but a different job so that I could focus kind of on making my short film for a guy named Andrew Gunn, who made movies like Freaky Friday and some others. Made the short film The Memo, which ended up getting licensed by HBO for about 2 years. It's great, almost like coming home. And then I found a job at a company called Warner Independent Pictures that was going to make movies of the 70s, which I was really into, just more independent-minded movies. This was around the time of Miramax at its height. Pulp Fiction, movies like this were really of interest to a lot of the bigger studios, including Warner Brothers, which created this company. And so I was there. The company wasn't super successful, but I had a great time because I had a wealth of opportunity. We made movies like Good Night and Good Luck. We acquired movies like March of the Penguins, a documentary. I got to go to film festivals, Sundance, Toronto, and really look for filmmakers and look for ideas and meet people, which I did. All of this is in my business called what I call building your creative capital. Right? So why should anybody believe that an idea you have is a good idea? Because you had another idea that was good. You have some creative capital with them. That director you thought was good is a good idea, or that script you thought they actually liked, so they believe you. All of this was building my creative capital. In order to progress that, though, I needed to do that full time. I was an assistant there, so I was doing partially administration, partially creative, almost creative on the side. I wanted a job where I was able to find ideas full time and actually get paid for it. And I found a job working while I was there, I also made another short film with the same writer, director, performer. That one was called Mandingo in a Box. These are both satire comedies, by the way, available on YouTube if you want to check them out. The Memo, by the way, the memo is about a memo that starts a revolution, except for there's one guy that didn't get the memo. And Mandingo in a Box is about the perfect guy from the standpoint of two of our main characters, and we're in a time where you can actually buy that person in a box. By the way, Renee and Beats and Sala were big contributors to financing the memo over 10 years ago who are in here. So hit your friends and family up for money and give them credit. Mandingo in a Box was about a Mandingo who comes in a box who's perfect, except for he's not perfect. So a satire. Made that short film. Also got licensed by HBO, went to the American Black Film Festival, which is a great festival, building my creative capital, but I wanted to do that full time for feature films, and I found a job working for Brad Pitt's production company called Plan B, and that's largely happens because you build your creative capital, people hear about things that you are doing or interested in doing, and then they want to bring you over to do that for them. When I was at Warner Independent, I didn't get these scripts, but I was the first person to have the script Juno. I was the first person to have the script Lars and the Real Girl, and I championed these and tried to buy them, or tried to get my company to buy them, even though they didn't. And so I met people heard about me, and as a result, I was able to get a job working for Brad at Plan B, where one of the projects we founded but I didn't complete, I left before it was done, is World War Z, which started as a book. From there, I went to a company called Mandate, now called Good Universe, and I co-produced a movie called 50/50 there. I also worked on another movie called Drag Me to Hell, just sort of learning. The difference between Plan B and why I left is I was supporting as a creative executive at Plan B. I went to this other company who had heard about stuff that I was doing, and they said, you can run and be in charge of your own movies. You can put your own point of view. You'll be responsible for the totality of it, for better or for worse. If you do well, you'll get rewarded. If you do poorly, you'll get fired. So I made a couple of films there, which was great, but, and this is probably a conversation for another time, I've always had a global perspective, going back to the picture that you saw, just an awareness of the world at large. And one of the things that I've been most interested in is how what we make here in the United States or in the West, especially in film, travels around the world, because I believe film is an international language. It's something that, as good at TV shows as we have, Breaking Bad, Sopranos, The Wire, other things like that, they don't travel as well, right? People are still watching The Godfather today all over the world, and that was made in the 70s. You guys have probably all heard of The Godfather and seen it. You probably don't know what show was #1 in 1974. Or if you do, you don't go back and rewatch it, like many people do films. In particular, the images that you put out in the rest of the world, have an impact on how people see not just America, but perhaps your particular point of view. For me, let's call that African American or African and American. And when I was in Uganda, both in 87, 88, and then again I was there in 2004, you see Western impact music, film have an impact. This stuff travels, and so I always wanted to be making something that I thought could carry images as I saw them back to places like Africa, Europe, South America, etc. And to do that, you got to work at a global company. And a lot of times, film business has a very narrow view of things, and I was experiencing that until Disney called. And I just thought, well, it's a global company. They're involved in television, film, animation. They own ESPN. At the time, they owned Marvel. They didn't even own Lucasfilm yet, which is Star Wars, of course. And so since then, they've acquired all of those things, and I just thought there was an opportunity to learn about all of those things and maybe participate in making them, and then see how you can take that around the world and have more of a global perspective, how more of a global perspective helps you actually achieve something at the company. And it's been really true, actually. So while at Disney, I've made a couple films. I got there, I made a film called Prom. Didn't really work at the box office, but it was a good experience getting to know Disney and wasn't extremely expensive. I next went on to make a movie called Saving Mr. Banks, which to me is about creativity. It's about the writer of Mary Poppins books and Walt Disney trying to acquire those books. Last year I did a live action version of Cinderella as well, and that leads us up to Queen of Katwe, which is coming out in less than 2 weeks. September 23rd in 15 cities, including Los Angeles, and then September 30th worldwide. And the reason that this movie got made, I've been developing it for about 6 years. Same timeline actually as Cinderella, although Cinderella got made first, is I was working on them at the same time, and the article came to me from ESPN, the magazine, which is owned by Disney. Some friends of mine that work at ESPN Films do the 30 for 30 documentaries, gave me the article just thinking it was a great story. They didn't know, my heritage goes back to Uganda. That obviously drew me to the story. Then our young character, Phiona, who's a real person, was 9 or 10 around the time, but I related to her just thinking about my experience as a 12-year-old in Uganda. So I connected to that. But then I was also working on Cinderella, which is, considered one of, if not the greatest underdog stories, in fairy tale lore. And this was just as good, if not better, an underdog story. And in fact, in this case, a lot of the things we look for in Disney films involve magic, imagination, heart, humor, adventure. I thought it had all of those things, even though the magic of it wasn't fake magic, it was real magic. Meaning the magic was stranger than fiction could be. If I made up the story, you'd think I was, just trying to Disneyfy a story, give you something that couldn't actually happen except for that this happened. So we developed it. It took about 4 years, and until I found the right director. Actually, about two and a half years till I found the right director. Another 1.5 to 2 years before we had the right script. And I believe the next slide is a little bit about what the movie is and how it came to be. That's perhaps more than you guys have seen on online.
Mama, can you do big things from such a small place?
Don't think about such things.
Why not?
You'll be disappointed.
When I first read The Queen of Katwe, I was about 10 pages in when I broke down and cried because I had been so inspired.
Young girl, come inside. The thing that really struck me when I first read the script was how heartwarming it is, how full of joy in spite of a very difficult life these people manage to have.
Why are you letting her win?
I'm not letting her.
The story came from an amazing young man at Disney who is Ugandan, called Tendo Nagenda. He was in Kampala for a family reunion, and he told me about Phiona, this extraordinary young girl who became the Ugandan female chess champion.
Checkmate.
Checkmate.
Checkmate. She won.
You could be the best in all of Uganda.
God, how can I become a champion?
I have lived in Kampala, Uganda, over 27 years, and it is such a privilege making a film about Katwe in Katwe with people who are the heartbeat of the original story.
You must never surrender. The true life Robert and Phiona are with us on set every day, and they're always an incredible source of both inspiration and authenticity. Sometimes the place you are used to is not the place you belong. You belong where you believe you belong. Where is that for you?
Medina, she is from the streets of Chibuli, which is the neighbor slum of Katwe, and she has been on her own, much like the real Phiona.
We were shooting a scene on the street, and Medina turned to me and said, "This is my story. I've been here." I think it just put things in perspective. I felt very privileged and honored to be able to usher these children through this. I just said to them that this is our opportunity to tell the world your story. And that was a moment where real life and the world of cinema, that line no longer exists.
Am I ready?
You belong here. We're all very aware how blessed we are to be making this film here in Uganda.
The very fact that we were having the opportunity to tell this remarkable story about Phiona was cause for celebration. And I think we were all on the same page when it comes to that.
Rated PG.
Thank you. So, yeah, that's a little bit of what we've been working on. It's you know, it's a process in terms of learning all of the things going into making a film. Constant learning process. Don't know it all. There's tons I'm learning every day on new projects, but the evolution is learn how to make films, learn how to make them well, learn how to tell stories, learn how to tell them well, learn how to do that for Disney well, Saving Mr. Banks, Cinderella. You know, my feeling and what I stated to my bosses is I feel like I know Disney, what the brand wants to be. It's a movie about Walt Disney. It's a movie about Cinderella. Got it. If you guys like that, then this movie is a Disney film, and we should do it. And they backed me, and so here we are. You know, it's very important though, and this is what I'll kind of leave it with because I think it's important for you guys as well, to be able to put your point of view into what the work that you're doing. Crucial, not always obvious, but very crucial. Even there's parts of Cinderella, there's parts of Saving Mr. Banks, there's parts of every project that I've done where I'm instituting my point of view to greater, I mean, to some people will really know it, some people won't know it, but always trying to find a way to do that. And then this is kind of a culmination of those things. But I hope a jumping off point to beginning to do it even deeper level if we can make the film really work. I think more will be desired, more stories, more projects done in this way, which is a very unusual way. We shot the movie in Uganda and South Africa. We shot it with probably 13 to 15 nationalities working on the film, including Ugandan, obviously Kenyan, South African, Congolese, Rwandan, Turkish, English, American, Indian, on and on and on. I'm probably leaving out Nigerian. David Oyelowo is Nigerian. So, you know, there's a way to make a movie by Africa for the world, and I hope that this is an example of that. I could do some questions. I could do some answers. I could show you guys a little bit of the movie, but maybe we do questions first. Yes, sir. Well, I think you take how you see the world, what your experiences are, where you grew up, how you see the world, and you make sure to speak to that. For me, starting at the script stage, character development. Would the person say this? Where's this person from? How do they think? Should they be, you know, should they look like this? Should they look like that? Where should they live? I'm doing my next film that I'm making. We're going to shoot here in Los Angeles. It's an adaptation of a book called A Wrinkle in Time, which came out in 1963. But we're doing the adaptation with, the book was adapted by a woman named Jennifer Lee, who wrote and directed Frozen, the animated film. And it's going to be directed by Ava DuVernay, who directed Selma. And we're shooting in Los Angeles. The house where the kids grow up is in the Adams District, right, which is close by where I live. You know, we're going to shoot at Crenshaw High. We're going to do, you know, we're going to tell the story in a different way, and that's because Ava's got that point of view that she's putting into it. We're all sort of supporting it and also contributing our own points of view. It's not a black film per se, but it's a multicultural film in many regards. We're going to have a lot of different viewpoints represented in it, and then retell the story from a 21st century point of view. So just think about your experience and what's relevant about it in every project that you work on, and that includes, you know, how you set up a shot, you know, what you're paying attention to. On this film, we had 2 cameras rolling all the time. We had a set shot, and then we had somebody who was handheld, kind of getting in for intimate details, and that gives you a different experiential way of telling the story, not just like back here, but you have the setup and then you can punch in, and that's also point of view. Mr. Sensalo. Mm-hmm. 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 It's been there. It's been there in limited form. We ran a full trailer on ESPN as an example. We ran a commercial, I think a 30-second or a 60-second on the Olympics right after Usain Bolt won the 100-meter. But this is a smaller budgeted film, and therefore the marketing and distribution budget is smaller, and you have to be very concentrated. There's as equal an amount of publicity that's important to launch the film as there is media paying for marketing. If you want to get on the Super Bowl, for instance, or Jimmy Fallon or something like that, you're paying a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money, so we have to be very precise. We'll be in all those places, but we were really actually waiting until we launched the film at the Toronto Film Festival, which we did this past weekend, September 10th, to launch our broader media campaign. And so you'll be seeing a lot more of it this week, a lot more of it next week, and then even the following week, a lot more. So it's just sort of beginning, but it's concentrated in the 3 weeks. If you have something like Star Wars, you start a year out, and you go and you go and you go. That's a huge budget. This is the antithesis of that. Yes.
Kind of a two-part question, but unrelated. What were some of the obstacles that you found that you were facing up into getting to like this position that you've wanted, or you've come to see that you have wanted? Either colleagues or with yourself, or whatever's happening in your life.
Yeah.
And then I'm just noticing, especially with Disney, a lot more women in film, with directors and actresses, and just story-based films about strong, women, or just women in general that are strong. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's because more women are coming to film, or is it because executives and producers are making those decisions to bring in, minorities, or broadening the span of ethnicities and stuff and ideas?
Yeah. Good questions. I'd say, I'm glad you're noticing that from Disney. I think we've got a long way to go, as does the business overall, to be honest with you. Obstacles I faced, probably too numerous to cover, but there's obstacles every day. I mean, this film actually is the hardest film I've ever worked on. I mean, in every way, shape and form. So there's an obstacle daily in it. But for me, in terms of my career, I mean, first of all, there's just like no connections to the entertainment business. So you don't start with like, hey, this is how the industry works, and come on in, and so mentors and guidance vis-a-vis entertainment is something hard to obtain, and that affects you in terms of having an overall vision for what's possible, and also confidence in being able to achieve it, and then lastly, like something to fall back on or rely on when you can't quite do it yourself. So those obstacles have been plentiful. It's been it takes time to curate relationships and build, again, what I call creative capital, so people believe what you say is something that they should believe. So there's been those obstacles of meeting people, but those are definitely overcomable. Financial, you don't get paid anything to do this work for a long period of time, and in fact, maybe ever. So it's like, you guys we're in the Fine Arts building. I wouldn't even try to guess the number of artists who struggle financially versus artists that don't struggle financially. So don't get into this for the money, I'll tell you that right now. because you'll be disappointed and you might not make it. That won't allow you to persevere, right? So financially, there's been struggles, and so you just kind of figure it out and go on faith. You gotta hustle. You gotta hustle. You gotta go really fast, really hard all the time. You can't be outworked, essentially. So that's another obstacle. And then really getting people into your point of view and really having them understand why that's a viable, feasible thing. That's a constant struggle. That's a constant iteration. You know, we made this film, but I don't know that the powers that be at my company think it's going to be financially successful, right? And that will determine if I get to make more films like it. So I think they're happy that we made it, but if we lose a lot of money, they're going to think that this point of view isn't viable financially, as an example. So that'll be another hurdle to sort of convince them, especially if you're talking about a larger budget. So that's a constant struggle, is to get your point of view validated and respected, and then invested in. In terms of opening up film for female directors and you know, diversity of all kinds, gender, sexual, cultural, race, etc., socioeconomic. I think that's a long-term process. I think why you probably see it more at Disney is because it's invited from the very top to happen, and there's a lot of people who are taking that seriously and making Disney put its money where its mouth is, both in animation and in live action, and at Lucasfilm. You know, the person who runs Lucasfilm, Kathy Kennedy, very renowned producer of many films, including Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., list goes on. Runs Lucasfilm, produces the first Star Wars, produces all the Star Wars movies, so she's got an impact. And yeah, they're listening to a lot more of us. And it's not that there's more female directors as one example. I just think that there's more people paying attention to those directors now, and making a point to seek them out. I would hope. So hopefully it continues. Yes.
How much involvement do you find yourself having in the post-production side? And when do you find yourself doing
A lot of involvement in post-production. Typically for a film, a feature film, theatrical feature film, rules are governed by the DGA, Directors Guild of America, in terms of a director having a cut. So they usually have 8 to 10 weeks to deliver a cut, and then you see the cut, director's cut, and you start to work on it from there. I mean, in reality, you're always rewriting the film or the script. You're writing it in development. When you're writing the screenplay, you rewrite it, and then a million iterations of that. But when you're talking with a filmmaker, a director, you're also talking about the script as a movie, how you're going to shoot it, what's it going to look like in post-production. So you really start really early. Then you rewrite the script during production. Different things happen. You throw out scenes, you add in scenes, you do different things differently than you thought you were going to do them in the screenplay phase. And then the same thing happens in post-production. You almost rewrite it again. So, for instance, on this film, I saw it about 7.5 weeks into the director's cut, which is really early. She let us in just because we were on an accelerated timeline, or at least we needed to know what we had to see if we wanted to get the movie out last year, actually. We decided to take our time, and that just starts a process of constantly watching new cuts of the film, watching new sequences of the film, suggesting ideas. You're playing with all your tools in post-production, performances, sound, music, additional dialogue, voiceover. You can play with a lot of different tools. So we went through, I can't even count how many times I've seen different versions of the film. Probably at least 500 to 1,000, somewhere in there. Yes.
Yes. What I like about like a Disney here is like because they definitely they find ways to tell a story, and
reach a message to the point where it's not just propaganda. Because I feel that the other studios try to push in a message, but the story's not strong enough. That becomes propaganda. So I'm asking is like, so you think the story is more important or the message to it is more important? You know what I'm saying? Like a point where it's not just propaganda, but you're still releasing a message, but making sure the story is strong enough.
Yeah, I think the story has to be strong enough, and I think you have to know why you're making it. You have to be very key on the themes of it, which lead to the message. But you can't make a movie out of a message, in my opinion. This is not a documentary. This is a narrative storytelling. We told the story from the point of view of Phiona, a young girl watching it. So there are things that are happening that you're not going to see because you're in that point of view, and that's part of the storytelling. To the degree that the message evolves out of that story, I think we've pinpointed what we think that is, but hopefully we're not so heavy-handed with it that it sort of overrides the story. I think you'll see diminishing returns in that respect. But yeah, the story is definitely paramount, and then what message you extract from that. Usually if a story is compelling, it's got some message to it that resonates with people. That's what I find.
That's good.
Yes.
Do you have like a checklist or like things that you look for when you're hiring like a writer, editor, cinematographer, director, something like that?
Yes, I mean not a standard checklist. No, look at the body of work. Depends on what you need for each film. So there's some cinematographers I'd hire on any film, but there's a lot of cinematographers, as an example, that I think can do something really well, but I wouldn't necessarily look for them to do something else. In fact, I'm about to work with one cinematographer for the second time. It's the first time I've ever worked with a cinematographer, as an example, twice in a row, although I have a tremendous amount of respect for the cinematographers I've worked with. In the case of this movie, as an example, Sean Bobbitt, who shot the movie, also a cinematographer, director of photography, also shot 12 Years a Slave, which I love. Photo-wise, I thought it was extraordinary. And he also shot he shot many movies, but he also shot another movie I loved called A Place Beyond the Pines, which I thought was great cinematography-wise, and in particular, looking for someone who could capture dark faces well with light, and with a lot of natural light, right? Which also involves how you design costumes, how you design production, but that was really important so that it didn't feel like you weren't seeing, but rather you were seeing. All of that became an important ingredient for hiring that person. And then in different movies, you have different criteria, but you usually look at the body of work. You're looking for excellence. You're looking for something that grabs your attention, that you want to emulate, probably, even if you're going in a slightly different direction. Sometimes you're looking for their capacity to do visual effects, to travel multiple countries, to blend grounded reality shooting, let's say in Los Angeles, with some otherworldly visual effects motif. So it just depends. Same for editing, same for visual effects supervisor, same for screenwriter. There's one of the things is, like, as a screenwriter, you can be, there's a part of you that's, of course, an artist, but there's also a part of it very important to being a craftsman. Like, we talk about it sometimes in theater. You could have a play that's 20 pages, 30 pages, 60 pages, 46 pages. If you're writing a feature film, you're most likely going to be somewhere between 90 and 120 pages, right? So there's things that you need to do in terms of craft to get that story across, not just your prose in terms of your artistry or your artistic language, and then how is it going to translate? Because we're a visual medium. We got music, we got cinematography, we got dynamic actors. So a lot of times a screenwriter that you look for is someone who can work with actors, can also work with the needs of the director in terms of budget, and then within that find a prose style that you think is going to be really sticky and good. So it just depends, but a lot of criteria. Yes, sir.
Tendo, understanding the film business is a business, and so ultimately they want to be in the black and they want to make money at the end. How is it that some films and filmmakers, writer-directors, are able to make films on a pretty consistent basis that don't seem to make any money? And I would say case in point would be Terrence Malick's films.
Good question. First of all, I think it's getting harder and harder. Okay, I think that there are films that would have gotten made 5-10 years ago, not going to get made today, even for artists like Terrence Malick. But, you know, the movie business is very dynamic, and when you dive into it, the way you make money is not always obvious, right? So Terrence Malick, as an example, can make films consistently because he has a very low footprint. He gets everybody to work for nothing for him because they want to work for him, be it Kate Blanchett or Chivo, the cinematographer, or Ben Affleck or anyone else. Usually they're working for nothing. He's like shooting maybe 30 days, 40 days or something like that. So they go in, they go out. They do that one almost as an artistic project, and whoever's financing it can finance it based on the participation of those actors who are participating because of the director. They can sell that movie internationally for probably close to their budget, if not a little bit more. And then if it's successful, they make even more money, even if it's a small amount of money, let's say an amount of money that wouldn't be significant for the Walt Disney Company, but significant for, let's say, a millionaire who's financing that. Then the other reality is that a lot of people are willing to take losses to be associated with movies. I think that there's billionaires, multimillionaires that come into the movie business, and they'd rather invest in a movie, go to the Academy Awards or go to the Golden Globes, get to know actors, than they would, and maybe lose $1 million or $2 million or something like that, than they would go to invest in like soybeans or something, you know, just because it's just a different thing that might make money. So there's a lot of people losing money, but the film business has had a consistency of people coming in and investing, even when they're most likely not sophisticated investors, and they're probably over the long term going to lose money. I think it's getting harder from the sophisticated financer standpoint to finance different films like that. So you might see an artist like Paul Thomas Anderson, who did There Will Be Blood. That movie was made for $50 million or something like that. Would never get made for that amount of money today. He made a movie called The Master, didn't make any money, but people love him. He's a great artist, so he probably is challenged on the budget for his next film, but he'll get Daniel Day-Lewis to do it, and somebody will finance it, and they'll probably find a way to make money. So it's getting harder, right? And that box is getting narrow. You have to be a better artist, probably make your film for a lot less, and then the people financing you have to be willing to do it almost as if they're not going to make money or break even. And then if they do, it's a bonus. Yes, and then, yes. Oh. Since I didn't really have a formal film school, I looked at a lot of different people, but usually producers. I really admire a company called Working Title, who are out of the UK. Two gentlemen by the name of Tim Bevan and Eric Fellner, who founded that company. They've made everything from Bridget Jones' Diary to 4 Weddings and a Funeral to I think they did United 93 and some other films, just because they were producers as artists, as I saw them. They were artists, but they were producers. Another guy who's since passed away, but he, I read about him early, is a guy named John Calley, used to run Warner Brothers, made movies like All the President's Men and Catch-22 and some other films, and he really championed artists like Stanley Kubrick, directors, and was willing to lose his job over doing so. So those are a couple people that I've looked at but it's probably an amalgamation of a lot of different people as I've gone and get to know people. And then when you get to really know them, you see if you really admire them or not just what you read about them. Yes. Yes. Yes, Disney definitely works with interns. I am probably as far removed from interns as I've been, so I actually don't even select the interns, although I can recommend people. There are other people that do select it. But in the past, interns, and as well as anyone I hire, actually be an assistant or anything like that, I look for a point of view. I look for how well you've educated yourself on what you're actually interested in doing. Like, do you know what you're getting into and why you're getting into it in terms of the internship? And then any experience that would show me that there's some strategy to that, whether it be, I traveled abroad for 6 months because I wanted to do X, Y, and Z and volunteer here. I might hire that person over somebody who's interned at NBC, ABC, and all these other places because they had a very specific reason that they did something. Also, part of telling stories or making films or television, in my opinion, is your experience, what you've done in your life. So it's not just majoring in film or in a specific discipline, it's also what you're going to use that discipline to achieve. What stories are you going to tell with it? So you have to have some life experience that speaks to a broad understanding of the world and also how you can utilize that in telling stories. And then I look for the other criteria, which I'm sure probably a lot of people do, just achievement, hustle, composition, how's the person suited. My business is very people oriented, so it's a collaborative art form. You're always dealing with other people, so you have to not just be right, you have to be effective, you have to effectively achieve whatever it is that you're working on, probably with other people. So what's your ability to work with other people is another thing I look at as well. Okay. Well, I know you guys probably have class and homework and stuff like that. I brought a little piece, if we have time, I don't know if we have time, from the movie, which is a segment of the movie. Oh, I'll take one more question and I'll do it. To find your what? Your passion. Oh, well, for everyone it's going to be different, but for me it was, I would suggest asking yourself what I call the $10 million question, which is to say, if you had $10 million in the bank, right? You paid off all your school loans, you took care of your family, you put people in houses, you got the best car you ever wanted, all that stuff. What would you do with your life? Like, what would you do when you get up tomorrow? What would you want to do? Whatever the answer to that is what I think you should work on figuring out how to do, even without the $10 million, because it's probably the truest idea of what you're passionate about. Some people that might be travel, hopefully if we're looking to be productive and contribute back to society, it's going to have to do with some form of work or service. But I would act as if money is not an object and then think about it really deeply and then research it. I mean, don't be casual about it. If you think you have an interest in something, explore it to as far as you can get on your own and then bring in other people to go even further, right? Because what you do on a day-to-day basis is not necessarily what it's going to be like. For me, when I launch a film, premieres like one day. Making the movie is like 6 years. So you got to love the 6-year process in order to enjoy the one day kind of celebration. So you really got to think about what's the process and what I'm going to be doing. And so it's not just passionate about like making music, for instance. Do you like all the technical equipment? Do you like producing it? Do you like singing? Are you willing to work on your vocal cords? Do you play an instrument? Are you going to play more instruments? Are you going to produce the film? Are you going to get in rehearsal every day to do it? Get as specific as you can. But it's actually like, my advice is maybe different than other people. I like to go internal and think about as deeply as you can what you're interested in, and then use that to inform what you do externally. All right, so I got like 16 minutes of the film here as a precursor to what you'll see in the theaters. I'll set it up a little bit. Kind of comes in, not in the middle of the film, but after the film's gotten going. And it's about, we're at a moment where Fiona's mentor, who's teaching her chess, Robert, is his name in the film, played by David Oyelowo, has like trained his students and his kids well enough to go compete at their first tournament against people who grew up playing chess. But Fiona's mother, played by Lupita Nyong'o, basically pulled them out of his chess school, believing that he was teaching them gambling and sort of things that were no good. And so we start the scene by him trying to convince her to let them go to play in this tournament, and then we'll see how that plays out.
To award a medal to a girl who plays with astonishing power. This year's Board 1 gold medalist is from the children's team of Katwe, Phiona Mutesi.
Thank you. So that's just a little taste of the movie. If you liked it, take 5 friends. And then tell them to take 5 friends. All right, that's what I got for you. Thank you guys for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And good luck to you all. Oh.